I first was introduced to Hearty Nutritionals, it was through a psychiatrist, and he, I believe, called it a medical food because he didn't want me to think it was just like a supplement I could just get off the shelf at like a health food store. And so my understanding is that after a lot of research, they're able to see exactly what it is that a mind like mine is missing. And I understand it's like an absorption issue, and that, especially because I'm a very easily stressed person, I have an anxiety disorder, that it has a lot of vitamin B and things that sort of help bring me back to like a normal, healthy level. I come from a family of a really dysfunctional family, a lot of mental illness. And as a young child, I had a lot of, I was so anxious, I sometimes would hide in a closet. I was very, very good in school, but I also had an eating disorder when I was in high school. So I often reacted to things in sort of self-harming ways. And then when I was in college, I had sort of a nervous breakdown. I was valedictorian of my class, straight A student, went to Berkeley, but the stress, I had terrible digestive problems, headaches. I would get so nervous that I just was afraid to go out. I lived in a dorm, and Berkeley has so many people. You know, I would walk down the main plaza, and I would just get so nervous with everyone coming out of their classes. And so very young, I think I was in my early 20s, they decided that I think they might have just called it depression at the time. So they put me on what they call MAO inhibitors, and that seemed to make me worse. And so my history is really one of having a really bad reaction to medications that they gave me. Things like weight loss, suicidal ideation. Some of the antidepressants that they gave me made me manic, and then I would like spend a lot of money or have really unhealthy behaviors in relationships. Then I'd go off the medication because of the side effects. Then I wouldn't be able to sleep. I'd have crying fits. And during the years that I was on medication, I think I've been hospitalized maybe three times. And that was like an actual, like 5150, where, you know, either my mother or my ex-husband, my husband at the time, would bring me in because I was suicidal. I mean, there were so many times where I'd go to the doctor and I would say, "You've got to give me another way. This isn't working." The crazy part of the story is the doctor that was even considering electroshock therapy was somebody who was a researcher, or he was doing some work for Hearty. And he's like, "Well, there is one other thing. You could try Hearty Nutritionals." And I'm like, "I just told you anything. I will do anything." And within a very short period of time, it was like the rest of that was just a nightmare. It's just amazing. Like looking back now, my whole life changed. I mean, it's not that I became a different person. I went back to being the person that I was before. But I don't think I think if I had been on that medication, the therapy wouldn't have worked as well, because medication is basically, it like gives you a different personality and you don't feel your feelings. Whereas the whole point of therapy is to be gradually introduced to feelings that are intolerable to you. And that's what Den did for me, was give me sort of the inner strength to be able to then do the hard work of the therapy. And then after that, I just kind of felt like, you know, maybe they were wrong. Maybe I never had any mental illness. And I just sort of started going through my life as a person who knew that if I had a thought and there's something that I wanted to do, that I could carry it out. And that was just not something I had in the past. I would get manic. I'd have an idea to do something. Maybe I'd want to do it. I think back then I was also writing. But, you know, when it came down to it, there was no follow through, because sooner or later I would have an anxiety attack, or I'd get very depressed and be very self-deprecating. So I was able to sort of have a sustained sense of self and just carry out some of the things I really wanted to do. And I can also say that I remember somebody broke up with me right before I went on Den, and I took that time afterwards and I said, you know, I'm going to become a person that I would want to date, and you know, really focused on myself, focused on my show, focused on my work, focused on my daughter, and now I'm in a wonderful relationship, you know. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had so much shame from being in relationships and having people break up with me because they would say, "You're too high strung," or "You're too emotional." And yeah, it's funny. When I think about who I am now, I don't necessarily think of myself as an unemotional person, but I think of myself as a deeply feeling person, but not somebody who can't handle life's not perfect, but I've got this perspective that I'm a fully functional person, like physically healthier. And so being physically healthier and mentally healthier has sort of allowed me to do all the other things that are good for my health. You're not starting from a deficit. You're starting at whole. And then from there, you can do all the things that will make you. One thing I've noticed, a friend of mine lives down south, and there was just a shooting in the bar that she normally goes to. And I was thinking about how that community now is dealing with PTSD. And I know what PTSD is like, and it's a really, really long road. And I remember thinking to myself, I now feel like I could be somebody who could go into a community and say to them, look, I know what you're going through, but there's hope. But these are the things you need to do to take the best possible care of yourself. And one of those things is making sure that your body is getting the nutrition that it needs. And that I actually think that when people go through PTSD, if they were to use DEN, it would just help them. It's like I said, like a shock absorber, so that their body, because I don't think people even, when a person's in a PTSD situation, they don't even realize what that does physiologically to the body. And so I think when you are able to know that you can get your body to sort of like an optimal level, then everything's is easier. And I just wish, this is my wish for people out there who are suffering, that people would really understand the physiological component and stop feeling guilty or ashamed, thinking that their thinking is messed up. Because if you have a deficiency and you're not absorbing the right nutrients, you're going to act in an insane manner. But that's a physiological problem. And once the physiological problem is corrected and you're balanced, then your response, I think you can blame on your coping mechanisms. But until you get yourself up to a point where your body is functioning optimally, it's like having, like having one leg. In fact, I started taking DEN, it was pretty obvious that it was actually a deficiency. And so then now it's like I've got two legs.